Good morning, America. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy. We've got a lot of news to cover, and actually, Trump made some big announcements when it comes to his tax plan. And it's either he's been doing it piecemeal or this is part of an overall plan and strategy. Might think it might be the latter, but again, it hasn't been, it's been a bit disjointed. Looks like he might be pulling things together, but again, there's some very bold proposals coming out. And tomorrow or today, Kamala Harris is supposed to be releasing her tax plan, so hopefully we'll get some new information there. And both campaigns could be a lot clearer on what they're going to do for the economy and their proposals moving forward. So again, with this new news, that's what's going to be the focus of today, pros and cons from both sides of the aisle, and take a look at how that can impact you. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy, the live or on rebroadcast. And there's a lot of information today. One of the first articles I'm going to jump right into is something that I've talked about quite a bit and will continue to talk about. And what's coming up? The next tax deadline. That's what's coming up. So there's an article from CNBC. If you're not aware that October 15th is a tax extension deadline, it's due. And it has some helpful advice, a lot of stuff, the same stuff that I've repeated ad nauseum. Get your returns in. If you have an extension, get them in. If you haven't filed a return, get them in. So again, this just is another reminder. We're already, what, about 20 days out from the tax deadline? So if you don't have a plan to get your tax returns in, even if they're imperfect, you can always file your return, get something in, meet the deadline, and then amend it. So it's ideal to have everything put together beforehand, but if you don't have everything, just file a return and then amend it to correct it. So one of the concerns here is if you can't pay the balances, what to do if you still can't pay, file it. You can ask for an installment agreement. You can ask for a hardship status if you can't afford to make the payments. But the largest, there's two penalties, and it mentions it here. The failure to pay penalty is the second largest. So what does the IRS care about more than you paying your taxes? Filing your taxes. So that's the biggest penalty, 4.5% a month penalty until you cap out at 25%. Now, then you take the failure to pay penalty, is if you're in a collection status, it's 1% a month. If you're not in a collection status, it can be 0.5% or 0.25% if you're in an installment agreement. But that accrues monthly until you hit 25%. So cumulatively, the failure to pay and the failure to file your tax returns can add up to 47.5. So each one can go up to 25%, but together they cap out at 47.5%. But that's almost half of your tax bill. That's a lot. So the failure to pay accumulates much slower than the failure to file. The failure to file, you get hit with that penalty in 5-6 months down the road, it's maxed out. So again, if you did the extension, file by the due date and save at least on that penalty, which is nastier, much nastier than the failure to pay. So the tax deadline was April 15th, but if you had an extension, they give you 6 more months to file. But the failure to pay penalty starts accumulating from what date? When the taxes were due. And the taxes were due on April 15th. There is a penalty for not have paid your taxes throughout the year, but thankfully in 23 it was only 3%. In 2024, it will be 8%. So a huge jump. So if you missed the tax lien, it's 0.5% unless your case goes into collection status. And again, this is similar numbers to what I was just, capped at 25%. And then the failure to file penalty, unless it went up. Anyway, they might have rounded this up to 5%. But again, they cap out at 25%. If you're in a disaster area, which we have been talking about, this link should take you directly to the irs.gov website. But again, you definitely need to file even if you can't pay. The IRS will pursue these returns for at least 6 years, and they could get extended out. And the soonest the tax debt will expire will be 10 years. So if you owe less than $50,000, it's going to be almost automatic. You can do it online through irs.gov. You can do a short-term payment plan. For 180 days, they'll give you time to pay it. But again, they'll give you much longer term. You have to just sit there and negotiate with them a little bit. Typically, as long as you're paying it off within 72 months, they'll put you on a payment plan without too much fuss, as long as everything is put together, so you have a good history of filing and paying your taxes. So again, I think this is a great article. Glad CNBC came out with this. Number one thing, don't ignore it. If you have other issues or concerns, give us a call. We do a free consultation. Our number again is 520-485-7371. So again, this is a funny quote here. Don't ignore it because it won't go away. Youngblood, who's a tax professional, said. I've had clients come in and they have a whole pile of unopened letters. And he says the IRS is not as bad as people think. Well, sometimes they are. But in general, they just want to get something set up. They want to start getting the money flowing in. They actually want to work with people. And believe it or not, their goal is not to put people in jail. Their goal is to get a payment plan set up and start getting payments flowing into the IRS. That's really what they want. So, important article, important pieces of information here. Don't procrastinate. If you're concerned about it, give us a call. We'll tell you exactly what you need to do and how to move forward. So we're going to really pivot here to the Middle East. And I think it's important. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but the United States is sending more troops to the Middle East. Why? Because the Hamas thing is still raging. Hezbollah is escalating. They had plans to do another attack on Israel, similar to October 7th, where they would, and probably on a much larger scale, where they would just raid settlements, capture, kill, slaughter civilians. And so, again, Israel, to preempt that, did the pager attacks, and then the radio walkie-talkie attack, and then they launched a huge airstrike on their top commanders and to destroy as many rockets and weaponry as they could. So again, Israel is taking steps as Hezbollah was getting ready to put into action the plan to to attack their civilian base and slaughter as many civilians as possible. Again, these are horrible war crimes being committed, first by Hamas. People say that Israel is committing war crimes. You could argue that, but Israel is basically feeding their enemy right now in Gaza and has been for months. And who's controlling that and causing hunger? Hamas. So I have almost no sympathy for Hamas. So we have about 40,000 troops in the region. We're continuing to build that up. Some of them are trying to contest the Houthis, messing with shipping and causing a lot of problems with shipping in the Red Sea lane. And that's another huge issue there. But the Middle East is becoming a more dangerous place overall. Going on that, again, this is kind of a tongue-in-cheek article. Israel continues to alter the terms of Hezbollah leaders' retirement packages by blowing them up. Kind of a funny article, depending on your point of view. but again, this talks about how Israel is actually defending itself and how they're doing the work of the United States, getting rid of and targeting some of the worst terrorists out there. One of the Hezbollah terrorists that they killed was responsible for bombing and killing hundreds of Americans in Beirut. So it's they threw 500 sorties by Israeli planes to destroy Hezbollah's command and control structure. They're already pretty much at war. And the question is, what side are we going to be on it? And how are we going to address it? So it's been tough for Israel throughout the globe and for Jews that have been targeted on American campuses and throughout the country. So again, it's very scary to see in 2024 a rise in anti-Semitism again. And we talk about hate and division. God is a huge source of it. Switching gears yet again, California, and this is Front Page Magazine, David Horowitz, pretty right-leaning, but this is interesting that California, and interestingly, they just passed a bill, and I actually gave Gavin Newsom kudos for banning plastic bags. All plastic bags are now banned in California. Why? Because the heavier duty ones that they mandated and that they were making people pay for are just as bad, if not worse, at polluting the environment than the small, thin plastic bags that most of the country uses. So sometimes they mandate something and it's worse than before. So they're actually going back to paper. Most people are using paper, or you can bring your own bags, the heavy duty bags that you can reuse time and time again. Some made out of cloth, etc. There are issues with germs, etc. with those kinds of bags. But going with that, they banned bags, but also, and they really point out, drugs are legal in California as long as you pay the pot tax. Shoplifting is legal under, I think it's $9.50 or whatever. However, Gavin Newsom definitely made a huge attack on free speech. So, speech, however, is not. So they made a new law targeting memes and false advertising. So they passed this law, so they get this new law in place that Gavin Newsom just signed, banned election memes, which again is going to get overturned in the courts. It's just going to take a while, and they're definitely going to cause some damage while they do this. So the Attorney General is filing a lawsuit against ExxonMobil, claiming that they deceived Californians for half a century with slick marketing, promising that recycling would address the ever-increasing amounts of public plastic waste. I'm confused here. Isn't this what liberals have been pushing, is recycling? Don't we want to encourage recycling? But now they're going after... I mean, we're up on a break. We'll get to this when we come back. Welcome back, everybody. So just going to wrap this up real quick. It's funny how, and I think it's a good thing to encourage recycling. I don't think it would address or reduce the amount of plastic waste out there. But where is most of the plastic waste in our environment coming from? Not the U.S. It's coming from third world countries that don't have good sewage. They don't have good trash facilities and processes, and a lot of that just gets dumped in the ocean. So again, I think it's overall plan to go after oil companies, to go after plastics. And do I have an issue with plastics in our environment? Absolutely. Is this the way to go after ExxonMobil and go after them for their speech, which they have a right? They have a right to take out ads. If you disagree with the ads, ignore them. Don't buy their product. Again, there's ways to go around this. But this idea that we can attack people for using their free speech rights is a problem. So we're going to jump to another claim. Again, this is a Haitian group seeking to go after Trump and Vance with criminal charges over pet eating claims. Now, again, you've seen the cat memes, the puppy memes, everything throughout the area. And so this has kind of been a tongue-in-cheek thing, with all the cat memes. Of course, they're meant to be somewhat funny and ironic, but also highlight the problem with 20,000 Haitian immigrants in a town of 50,000. It's a problem, and the locals are talking about how it's a problem. So they're suing them, saying that they spread and amplified the debunked claim that they're eating cats, dogs, and wildlife. Well, there's videos out that they were grilling cats. It was a year ago, but I mean, this has been a problem since 2020. People have reported their cats and dogs missing, and there's videos of them walking around with geese and ducks that they caught at local ponds. So is it, again, claiming that they're debunked? Again, let's look at the facts. Let's take a step back, but to try to get a criminal charge against Trump and Vance for, political memes, I think is more than a stretch. And again, you're not supposed to take it seriously when you have cats carrying machine guns, riding tanks, stuff like that. But again, if it wasn't true, if they were just making this up from scratch, that's one thing. But there are proofs, there are police reports. Go talk to the locals, they'll tell you. And so there's plenty of videos if you want to actually look into it. It says they've suffered direct threats and mockery. So, oh no, we get mocked. But here's some of the videos of people talking about it and talking about the ducks and the geese. This gentleman in particular, I believe I watched this video before, he claims that if he's a hunter, he has to have a license, he has to have everything put in place. And if he went and just grabbed a duck or geese, he could lose his license, he could be put in prison, he could lose his truck. Anything connected with him hunting illegally could be taken. And yet the officials are doing nothing about people just grabbing ducks and geese and eating them. And not to be a little sensitive to the Haitians, it is if they come from a very poor country. We've seen this before. It's not just Haitians. With Vietnamese, when they first came to the country, there were problems with eating pet dogs because they eat dog in Vietnam. It's what they do. But people were getting upset when little Fifi would go missing. And I know people love their pets, and as people become acclimated, a lot of these issues go away. But it is, again, suing people for memes, I think, is beyond ridiculous, and hopefully it gets smacked down for violating free speech. So, next article, and this is an interesting one. So, it's not so much this article. The headline here is a little misleading. So, Kamala Harris called for an abortion filibuster carve-out. And he did say shame on her. And if that's what she's doing, he won't support her. So he qualified and said that if this is what she's pushing, we're not going to get rid of the filibuster. And the filibuster has been vilified right and left, but especially by the left in recent years. And Manchin and Kristen Sinema, so two independents that have stepped away from the Democrat Party, and neither one is running for re-election, really emphasized that removing the filibuster would be a mistake. Why? That if it goes from a dialogue, and the Senate is supposed to be more of a senior body where they don't jump from stance to stance. It protects from huge changes in policy and forces people to sit down and negotiate things out and talk to people rather than going back and forth. So they say it would be the House, the craziness of the House of Representatives on steroids. And the Constitution and the government was specifically organized this way to protect from huge swings, because one of the problems with when you have huge swings in policy, people can't plan, people can't prepare for it, and it makes for a very volatile government. So he said, I think it's the most horrible thing to attack and get rid of the filibuster. A bad idea. And Krista Massanama pretty much is on the same page. She called this an absolute terrible, short-sighted idea to get rid of the filibuster for one policy. If you really want it, convince people to vote for it and follow the law, not just break the filibuster isn't law, but it's one of the policies that's been around for hundreds of years that has really helped the Senate be a different body, more collegial body. And again, with the rancor going now in politics, it hasn't quite been that. But again, the filibuster does help maintain and preserve stability within our democracy. So the next article, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but again, Trump was briefed. Again, we have 2 assassination attempts already, and he's briefed on real threats to him from specifically Iran, and they're behind plans and plots to assassinate President Trump. Why? Because they don't like him. Because they believe he's going to be a lot tougher on them and terrorists in general, which probably is absolutely true. And so this is from the Director of National Intelligence. So this comes directly from the Biden administration about ongoing threats from the Iran terror regime and plans to assassinate him. And it's intended to destabilize and sow chaos by taking out a national candidate for president, which, again, as the nominee from a major party, it would be a huge thing, especially right before an election. So with that, I'm just going to jump to the next article. I have to give kudos to the House and the Senate. And again, our Congress stepped up in a big way. So again, you had Mike Lawler and Richie Torres, a bipartisan bill to offer presidential nominees for president and vice president the same Secret Service protection as the sitting president and vice president. This last attack occurred, or almost happened, because they weren't securing the whole golf course, which is what they do when the president's out. And so when you have people running, it's absolutely key. I mean, again, you have this huge problem in Mexico with dozens of people I don't even remember how many, I think it was in the 80s or 70s or 80s, that got assassinated in this last election cycle. We don't have that here in the United States, nor do we want it. So again, it was unanimous, 405-0 in the House, and again, it was unanimous by unanimous consent in the Senate. So again, the 65 days, we've had 2 assassination attempts, and there's more out there. And I think it's great that the Biden administration is briefing President Trump on this, that Congress, House and the Senate got this passed fairly quickly. Why Congress has to act to do this is another question, but I'm not going to go there. And again, this is flown through. It's just going to Biden's desk for signature, and it would become a law. Hopefully, we will protect not only our candidates but our democracy, because that's extremely destabilizing to have people shot. Just ask anybody that remembers Kennedy. So, getting more into the topic of the day, economic plans. Now, this is interesting. Again, this is from townhall.com, which can definitely be, it's right-leaning, and it claims that it obliterates Kamala's claim she'll boost the economy. It's not exactly what they said. So, but, and so, again, she came out and went on. Part of this is that she's not very precise with her words. It's a great way to say that she fudged what people said. So she was on with, I'm blinking, Oprah. She was talking to Oprah, who is a huge Harris supporter, and on the May night she said that Goldman Sachs and the Wharton School of Business said her economic plan is better than Trump's. Well, not exactly. That's not what they said. And so there's a video of here from the CEO of Goldman Sachs, and he's claiming, like he said, pretty much says that a lot more has been made than this should be, because any difference by their models was like 0.2%, something like that over time. That hers would not help the economy, but Trump's would in the first few years, and then per the model that was used towards the end of the 10-year period, it wouldn't help the economy. So both Goldman Sachs came out, and you can watch the video, we'll link it. He said, look, this is way more that has been made of this than it should be. And then Wharton, here's an original article from Wharton, said, we didn't say that. They didn't say that her plan. So this article in Town Hall, well, it doesn't obliterate her claim that she'll boost the economy. Basically saying we didn't say that she would boost the economy. So she cited them to say that she would boost the economy, and neither one actually said that or meant to say that. It was misinterpreted. And this is the language directly from her interview with Oprah. So, so it was a Unite for America live stream event with Oprah Winfrey Thursday, and they directly refuted. Let's go directly to their words. And this is, we did not find a positive impact on the economy from her plan in any future year. The Trump plan does increase GDP for a few years, but lowers by the end of the 10-year budget window, a spokesman for the University of Pennsylvania's Penn Wharton budget model said. That's what they said. And again, she ran with that, claiming that it would actually help the economy. And it gets a little more into the details. I think part of it is they're running these models. It's how they set these models. Are they accurate? Who knows? But really, we need to be looking at the details, and that's really what we're going to dive into now. In one of the articles that I just skimmed over, it said that Harris will announce, it was an article saying, look, she might announce her economic plan today, or more details about it. Great. I welcome it. When it comes out, we'll discuss it. But claiming that people are supporting your economic plan when they didn't, it's stretching the truth or outright lying about it, is problematic. And people should be called out when they just make claims that are then just refuted by economists. So I want to really focus on what Trump just announced. So again, this is, he just came out, and there's pros and cons here. And in the title of today's show, it's tariffs versus tax breaks. Tariffs are not the cure-all that sometimes either Trump says or he's made out to say, like that it's going to solve a lot of the issues. Tariffs, economically speaking, as most economists would agree on this, they can have short-term benefits, but typically what happens is when you smack tariffs on other countries, they retaliate and they hit you with tariffs as well. Now, in most of the articles that I've read on this, here's the interesting. I read through. There are 3 different articles on this topic. We're going to touch on 2, one from Fox Business and one from CNN. Try to provide a balanced approach here. When they talk about tariffs, especially against China, it's something the Biden administration is already doing. So last week they announced a 100% increase on China EVs. And then they came out and I don't know if they're going to do it, but they just suggested, was it this week or last week? I think it was this week, a complete ban on Chinese EVs. Why? Because China is cheating like crazy. They're undercutting and doing everything they can to cheat and to undercut domestic production, which is a huge problem and would really hurt American manufacturers. So this is why the Biden administration is coming out and using tariffs as well at the same time, and sometimes they might be trying to outdo Trump or keep up with Trump as far as tariffs on China. But I think across the board, China has been recognized as a huge cheater. So let's get to this announcement, and I think it needs to be discussed hand in hand with tariffs. So in the background, they have a 50% corporate tax rate, blah, blah, blah. It's not 50% for all corporations. He wants a 50% made in America corporate tax rate. And he claims it will create millions of jobs, massively raise wages for American workers. And again, these are Trump words, and turn the United States into a manufacturing powerhouse like it used to be for many years. There are many reasons why we've lost a lot of manufacturing. Yesterday we talked about how we have multiple union strikes across the country. And again, we still need materials. We still need to trade with other countries to get raw materials, to get parts, to to build and put together a finished product. And there are trade advantages to trading with countries across the world. So tariffs across the board typically are seen as counterproductive. So it might help American manufacturing in the short term. Long term, it's anybody's guess how much that's going to help. But by dropping the corporate rate to 50% for companies here in the United States, I mean, it's a great idea to boost in production, but by bringing production back to the United States. So when we talk about, yesterday we talked about consumption tax or consumption versus income. The only true way to build, and we're on a break. So I'm going to we'll continue on this after the break. Welcome back, everybody, and we're going to continue with our deep dive into this new proposal, and really kind of talk about what does this mean and how can this affect you and your family. With Trump's latest tax proposal, and again, I think we need to look at this in connection with everything else he's proposed, reducing wages, on tips, primarily targets lower wage workers. For when you look at exempting overtime, is definitely blue collar workers, and again reducing tax burden or keeping the TCJA or Trump tax cuts in place across the board will keep rates low for Americans across the board. So it sounds great. The tariffs is the tricky part. How is he going to pay for a lot of this? Is by tariffs and trying to make sure he protects American manufacturing. Will it actually protect it? Again, that's why people debate things. So he's claiming he will give the lowest taxes. That is his tax plan, is to give the lowest taxes, the lowest energy costs, and that's something that's not talked about as much. But the regulatory burden put on oil, put on electricity, forcing electric companies to go to solar, to go to renewables, is driving up energy costs. And what does that in turn do? It drives up manufacturing costs. It drives up transportation costs, just getting goods from one place to another. It is a huge part of the inflation that has hit pretty much every sector of the American economy. So higher energy, when his first time in office, he cut regulation. He'll probably approve the Keystone Pipeline first day back in office. And again, get rid of regulatory burdens so that businesses can thrive. That is what he did the first time in office. And he's vowing to do that again, 2.0, and give access to the biggest and best market on the planet. So I think this is one thing that, is he going to reverse inflation? No. But imagine if he can cut energy costs, gas costs by $1 across the board. Right now I'm paying $3 a gallon in Arizona. And that's in Tucson. It's about $1 higher, or 50 cents to $1 higher in Phoenix. If you knock $1 off of that, that's a 33% reduction in gas costs. If you go up to Tucson or other areas, so it's $4, which I think is more typical across the country. You take $1 off of that, that's a 25% reduction in the cost of energy. So what people are paying at the pump, what truckers are paying at the pump, how much it costs to actually create energy by getting freeing up the use of fossil fuels, which again is the most reliable source of energy we have and the cheapest, except for maybe nuclear. It's going to have a huge impact on the economy. So interestingly enough, California is again attacking ExxonMobil. And again, that's not the only oil company they're going to go after. I saw an article, I don't know how true this is, that there was a group that was looking into making 3 Mile Island, reactivating that and making it an active power plant again. Again, modern power plants have so many redundancies built into them. But then again, you can have weird accidents like Fukushima. So there is a risk there. And again, anytime you have nuclear, there is a risk. But at the same time, as far as producing energy cheaply and efficiently, again, look at Europe. That's one thing that they do very well, is they have very cheap and efficient nuclear energy. So the idea here is to lower energy costs can have a huge impact on the overall economy. But he's saying only if you make your product here will you get the 15% corporate tax rate. And that's a huge deal. That's 6% difference in taxes. If you don't make your product here and you hire American job workers, if you don't make your product here and hire American workers for the job, then you will pay a substantial tariff, a very stiff tariff. So these are meant to be a punishment to American companies that ship jobs overseas, or that they're producing things overseas and then importing them to the United States. So again, the whole goal here, this has a potential for really hurting trade. So again, it's kind of a radical thinking where we're switching things on its head. And the taxes would be paid by American consumers, but by switching to tariffs and maybe eventually a sales tax, by reducing the dependence on an income tax, he's switching the focus of Americans from an income tax where income is punished or taxed to consumption where people pay when they buy stuff. and encourages what? Savings. So the way our politicians have set up our economy, set up our taxation system, it discourages savings. And that's one of the huge things that will help our economy in the long run and help individuals be prepared. So again, there are ways to address how it can and probably will hurt the poorest in our country, but these are concerns, and I think it's high time someone's willing to shake things up and look at a very different method of looking at this. So there's a lot to unpack just in this first paragraph. So he said, with this vision, I'm outlining today, not only will stop our businesses from leaving foreign lands, but on my leadership, we're going to take other countries' jobs. And foreign nations will be worried about losing their jobs to America and to bring them back, he declared. So again, flipping things on their head. Again, trade is very, very important for our economy as well, though. So this is where it gets very interesting to look at the different models. But I do think making America competitive isn't again, where we're actually competing for jobs rather than just watching jobs be sent overseas is a good thing. But again, we'll see how that goes. And he's claiming it'll raise hundreds of billions of dollars into our treasury. Economists don't agree with that. And they'll use that money to benefit the citizens. So collecting more money into the treasury, it all depends what the government does with it. If we sit there and just spend it and throw more money at society, it can raise inflation. So he claims it will not cause inflation, by the way. Depends how it's done. I don't know if I buy that. So while I'm optimistic about some of what he's saying, I'm trying to be very critical and as we go through this. So the current rate is at 21%. If we don't preserve the Trump tax cuts, Kamala Harris is going to raise it to 28%. Joe Biden had proposed getting rid of it altogether and raising it to 39.6%, which would double the current tax rate. Again, have a huge impact on corporations. 7% the other way is going to hurt corporations as well. A lot of people claim that's how you help the rich. Well, again, if the rich are helping the American people by creating jobs, that will drive wages up. That will help people thrive in this country. So it was a 35% pay increase or increase in the corporate rate that she had suggested. And then she's now going for 28%, a raise of 7%. So again, raising the corporate rate to 28% would raise $1 trillion for over 10 years, or $100 billion a year. But it would also hurt corporations. It would hurt jobs. It would hurt production in the United States. So jumping into the CNN article, just to kind of fill in some gaps and try to look at things from a different perspective. He's trying to portray himself as a big friend of big business. Big business is not always our friend, though. If you look at Springville, it's the big businesses that supported and worked with the Biden administration to bring in 20,000 Haitian immigrants. The schools are overwhelmed. The infrastructure is overwhelmed. You had a small town, and you added pretty much a quarter of its size to it, a quarter of the population to it within just a few years, and it's creating all kinds of problems. So again, as a big friend of big business, there's ways to be big friend of big business, but put Americans first. And I think that's the concern here. So again, the same thing will not only stop businesses from leaving, but take other countries' jobs. So again, flip things on its head. So again, almost the exact same statement as the other. And he was in Savannah, Georgia, so he wants to turn Savannah's port into a major export hub. Again, if we're exporting goods and creating more, if we're not consuming them here locally and we're exporting them, other countries are very likely to hit us with tariffs if that's what we're using to protect our own production. So again, it can be counterproductive. So again, you have the Harris' plan is to raise the corporate rate to 28%, increase this tax on stock buybacks to 4%, and by and large, she's gone along with President Joe Biden's recent budget blueprint, which has a variety of tax increases on big companies and wealthy, anybody over 400,000 to pay for it. So again, Trump, on the other hand, and again, it's election season, so take this with a grain of salt. Wants to eliminate federal taxes on tips, which Harris has gone along with, overtime pay, Social Security benefits, and as well as the restore SALT taxes, which again is something the Democrats were furious about when they did initially. I don't know if I agree with that. And keep the estate tax cuts from the 2017 law. So all of this would need to be passed by Congress. Let's see what this next election does. Again, if he doesn't have a healthy majority in both chambers, it would be a challenge. And then before we dive into tariffs, Harris is talking about raising some taxes, cutting some taxes. I don't care who it is, if it's Harris or Trump, if we don't stop the spending, eventually the taxes will have to increase in debt dramatically. Our budget is so huge that unless we stop spending, I was talking to my daughter yesterday, 10-year-old daughter, and she's in advanced math, and I said, okay, well, she asked something about it, and of course I had to go and say, well, let's turn this into an educational moment. How much are we truly spending? We're making roughly $5 a year and spending $7. And one of our dollars is going just to maintain our debt. So that's really only $4 we have for all of our needs as a country, but we're still spending $7. So it's really, what we're doing is really nuts, and it's unsustainable long term. So he's talking about a 20% tariff on foreign imports, and 60 to 100% on Chinese imports. And then he was saying that he has threatened to do a 100% tariff on countries that shift away from the US dollar. Don't know how he would do that. Sorry, I haven't been sharing this article. Don't know how he would do that, and that could be very concerning. 100% to 200% tariff on cars made in Mexico. And this is China's way to try to get around all the tariffs on them by, direct on cars directly imported from China. So, and the Biden administration is now doing the exact same thing, or just outright banning them. So, a lot of these are more bipartisan ideals. Would the Biden administration be doing this if Trump wasn't pushing this? That's another question. So, again, will tariffs actually help? Several studies from the Tax Foundation and U.S.-China Business Council say that overall tariffs will hurt the U.S. economy and can result in a net loss of jobs. So it's protectionism for protectionist's sake is not the best answer long term, but I do applaud some of his moves to encourage domestic manufacturing. Let's bring the jobs back. Tariffs might not be the way to do that. So again, it kind of takes another couple paragraphs and dives into that, but we're out of time. I hope this has been informational. There's so much here to break into and to understand where Trump is going with this. Overall, when you look at the overall picture, it's fairly complicated, but the overall gist is to cut taxes and grow the economy. through a combination of tax cuts and increase in tariffs. Will that actually work? Yet to be seen. But hopefully we have a lot more details tomorrow about Kamala Harris's tax plans, and we can discuss those and really compare apples to apples. So have a great day, and thank you for watching here at Guardian Tax Law.